I needed that interview to go right. Not because I was desperate, at least not yet, but because I was finally clawing my way out of a burnout hole that nearly swallowed me whole a year earlier. Back then, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Stafford, Ohio, trying to rebuild my life after a long stretch of unemployment. I'd left my old job in insurance claims due to burnout, and I'd been doing odd jobs just to make rent. This new opportunity? It was with a logistics firm just outside Willowridge, about 3 hours north. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was solid, with benefits and a real schedule. I could breathe again if I got it. The interview was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp on a Wednesday, and I didn't want to gamble with traffic or risk looking like hell after waking up at 4 a.m. So I made the decision to drive up the night before and stay in an Airbnb. I found one that looked perfect, a small, single-story home in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from the company's office. The listing said, "Private room with full access to kitchen and amenities. Peaceful and quiet. Perfect for professionals." It had solid reviews, a host named Jamie, and plenty of photos. Everything checked out. I booked it, packed a small overnight bag, left around 4 p.m., arrived just after 7 p.m. The sun was already low in the sky, casting that warm golden hue across the streets as I pulled up. It was a quiet suburb, rows of similar-looking houses, trimmed lawns, 2-car garages, textbook middle America. The house itself was a modest white and brick ranch with blue shutters and a paved driveway. I double-checked the address. Yep, 6128 Elmridge Way. I parked, grabbed my bag, and headed up the walk. The door was unlocked, which was unusual, but not totally alarming. I figured maybe the host left it open for me, which some do if check-in is contactless. I stepped inside and called out, "Hello?" No answer. I took a few more steps inside. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. The house was tidy, lived in, but not dirty. I was just about to text the host to let them know I'd arrived when, "Hi there!" I nearly jumped out of my skin. A woman appeared from around the corner, mid-40s maybe, shoulder-length graying brown hair, loose sweatshirt, dark eyes with deep circles under them. She looked as surprised to see me as I was to see her. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said, smiling quickly. "I'm Lacey. I'm staying here too. Just in the back room." I blinked. Oh, I wasn't aware this was a shared rental. "Oh yeah, it's split," she said, waving her hand toward the hallway. "You've got the front room, and I've got the back. Jamie said someone else was coming in tonight. I just thought I'd say hi so it's not weird, you know?" I forced a polite nod. "Right. Yeah, I get that. I'm Marcus. Nice to meet you." She held her smile a little too long. "Well, I'll let you get settled." She turned and walked off. I waited a second, then pulled out my phone and opened the Airbnb app to recheck the listing. Nowhere did it say anything about a shared rental, just private room. I tapped through all the details, even zoomed in on the photos. Only one bedroom was shown, and all the reviews talked about how quiet and peaceful the place was. None mentioned other guests. I frowned and messaged the host. "Hey, just checked in. There's a woman here who says she's also staying in the back room. Just wanted to confirm that." I didn't get an immediate reply, so I brushed it off for the moment and carried my bag to the bedroom. Clean sheets, lamp on the nightstand, a little desk in the corner. Looked fine. I was hungry and still had a sandwich and some fruit in my backpack from earlier. I headed to the kitchen to eat. Less than a minute later, Lacey appeared again, barefoot, with a mug of tea in her hand. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. I smiled weakly. "Just grabbing a bite." She leaned against the counter and sipped her tea. "You here for work?" "Job interview tomorrow," I replied shortly. She lit up. "Oh, really? What kind?" "Operations coordinator," I said. "Logistics company in Willowridge." "That's great. You look young. How old are you?" 24. She raised an eyebrow, smiled. "Still got your whole life ahead of you." I nodded, trying to keep the conversation short. I was exhausted. Mind if I ask something? She continued. I paused mid-bite. Sure. You're single, right? The bluntness threw me off. Yeah, I guess. She smiled again, only this time it didn't reach her eyes. That's rare these days. A lot of guys your age, they just want whatever, you know? Yeah, I guess. She stepped a little closer. My room's at the back, like I said. I've got a TV and wine if you want to just chill for a bit. Help take your mind off the interview. I forced a chuckle, trying to stay polite. Thanks, but I'm really beat. Just going to eat and crash. Her smile froze. Then slowly, it dropped. Oh. All right. She lingered another few seconds, then quietly walked away. I let out a long breath and looked down at my sandwich. Appetite gone. That's when my phone buzzed. It was from Jamie, the host. There shouldn't be anyone else in the house. Please leave immediately and call the police. I'm contacting Airbnb now. I went cold. I turned slowly toward the hallway where Lacey had walked. From somewhere deeper in the house, I heard a creak. Then a door opened. Then, footsteps. Heavy ones. Rushing. I didn't wait to see who it was. I dropped my food, snatched my bag from the table and ran. The front door slammed open as I tore down the steps, practically diving into my car. As I reversed out of the driveway, I saw someone, a man, rounding the corner of the house, sprinting toward me. I didn't stop driving until I reached the nearest gas station off the highway. Parked beneath the harsh fluorescence, I finally let myself breathe. I called the police, then Airbnb again. The officer who met me at the station took my statement and assured me they'd send someone to check the property immediately. Jamie, the host, was just as shocked and apologetic. They told me the house had been empty for over a month, cleaned and locked, waiting for guests. No one should have had access. I never found out who Lacey really was, or who the man was who came rushing down that hallway. The police later confirmed signs of forced entry on a side window, and Airbnb refunded everything without question. I ended up sleeping in my car at a 24-hour diner that night, jittery and exhausted. I still went to the interview the next morning. And somehow, despite everything, I got the job. I didn't tell them what happened. I just smiled, shook hands, and pretended like I hadn't spent the night running for my life. But I'll never forget 6128 Elmridge Way, or the way Lacey smiled with her eyes all wrong. And sometimes, when I stay in unfamiliar places for work now, I double-check the locks, pull open every closet door, and listen a little too closely for footsteps that shouldn't be there. I didn't even want to go to the wedding, to be honest. It wasn't that I didn't care about Julia, she was a sweet old friend from college. But after not seeing her for almost 7 years, getting a random invite to a small-town wedding in the middle of nowhere felt awkward. But Dean, one of my closest friends and also invited, convinced me to go. "Dude, it's a free weekend in the country," he'd said. "We'll road trip, crash in a nice Airbnb, and drink ourselves stupid on wedding wine." I eventually gave in. Part of me needed the break anyway. I'd been working overtime at the firm, barely sleeping, and hadn't left Chicago in months. Getting out into the open, even in the middle of nowhere, started to sound therapeutic. We left early on a Friday morning, crossing 3 states in Dean's silver Civic. We blasted music, argued about whether Iowa or Nebraska had more boring scenery, and laughed more than I had in weeks. By the time we reached Oak Ridge, Montana, the sun was already dipping low. It was one of those towns that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Just one diner, a gas station, a bar, and some scattered old houses surrounded by miles and miles of farmland. Julia's family had lived there for generations. Our Airbnb, which I'd booked with low expectations, turned out to be a little better than the pictures. A modest farmhouse, 2 bedrooms, old but clean, with wood-paneled walls and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon. But the real surprise was how far it was from the town. About 6 miles down a narrow dirt road, surrounded on all sides by tall grass, empty fields, and patches of forest. No neighbors, no streetlights, just quiet. too quiet. Dean loved it right away. "Bro, this is the kind of place you could disappear in." I laughed at the time. I wish I hadn't. We unpacked, ordered pizza from the only place in town that delivered, and stayed up talking until close to midnight. He crashed hard as soon as his head hit the pillow. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. Something about that house bothered me. Not because it was old, I liked old, but because of how still it felt. No distant cars, no street noise, no creaking pipes or hum of a city. Just silence. And when you're used to background noise, silence can feel like it's watching you. Still, eventually, I drifted off. The next day, Saturday, was the wedding. It was held in a small outdoor chapel near the edge of town. The ceremony was sweet, emotional, and honestly beautiful. Julia looked radiant, and her family welcomed us with warm hugs and teary eyes, even if I did feel like an outsider. The reception was more fun than I expected. Good food, free drinks, dancing under string lights. Dean and I didn't leave until almost 10 p.m., both buzzing slightly from wine and laughter. By the time we got back to the Airbnb, we were exhausted. Dean went straight to bed. I wanted a moment to sit in the living room, let my head settle. I turned on a lamp, kicked back in the old recliner, and scrolled through my phone for a while. That's when I heard it. A knock. Software deliberate. Just once. I froze, phone still in my hand. It had come from the front door. I sat up, heart already skipping. Out here? At this hour? I walked slowly to the door, peered through the peephole. Nothing. Still uneasy, I opened it a crack and stuck my head out. Pitch black outside. No movement, no car, no person walking away. The porch light barely lit the driveway, which was still empty. I stepped out, looked around. Just trees, wind, and shadows. I shut the door, locked it again, and stood there for a second, listening. Silence. Maybe the house creaked, or maybe an animal hit the door. My brain tried to rationalize it, but something about that single, isolated knock didn't sit right with me. I went back to the living room and sat again, this time keeping my phone in my hand and eyes on the front window. Then I heard it again. Another knock. But this time, from the back. I stood up so fast the recliner snapped upright. I rushed to the rear kitchen window and flipped on the porch light. Nothing. The backyard opened up into a wide, grassy slope that ended in a line of dark woods. I stared out for what felt like 10 minutes, searching for movement. There was none. My gut twisted. That knock had been too deliberate to be random. But who would be out here? We hadn't told anyone we were staying here. Even locals wouldn't casually wander this far into someone else's land, especially not at night. Eventually, I calmed myself enough to head to my room. I lay in bed, heart slowing, trying to believe it had all been in my head. The silence returned, and eventually, I fell asleep. What woke me next was another knock, this time on my bedroom door. I sat up immediately, lungs frozen. My eyes darted toward the door, and just as I opened my mouth, I heard a familiar voice. "Jamie, you awake?" "Dean." I got up and opened the door. He stood in the hallway, barefoot, pale, and clearly shaken. "There's someone outside," he whispered. "What?" He pointed toward his window. I heard footsteps. I looked out. There was a man, walking around the house, like he was looking for something. My stomach dropped. "Did he see you?" "I don't think so, but..." A click echoed from the front of the house. A metallic sound. The doorknob. Both of us turned toward the living room. We moved slowly, silently, just far enough to peek around the wall and see the front door. The porch light was still on, and someone was standing there. A man, mid-40s maybe, long brown coat, scruffy hair, his face barely visible through the window glass. But what I saw chilled me. He was holding something, thin, metal. He was picking the lock. I grabbed Dean's arm. "Call the cops now." He ran for his phone. I stepped closer to the door, my hand resting on the deadbolt. I didn't know what else to do. I just held it, as if that would stop the guy. He jiggled the handle, then stopped. For a moment, he just stood there, like he knew someone was on the other side of the door, like he was waiting. Then suddenly he turned and ran, not away, but around the house. I didn't follow. Neither did Dean. We locked ourselves in the master bedroom, barricaded the door with the dresser, and waited. The police took nearly 40 minutes to arrive. By then, whoever the man was, he was long gone. No footprints, no vehicle tracks, no cameras, obviously. Just two shaken guys and an unlocked barn door out back that we hadn't noticed before. The cops were kind but unhelpful. Took statements, looked around, suggested it might have been a local who mistook the place. We didn't believe that for a second. We left the next morning. Didn't stay for brunch, didn't say goodbye. I still don't know who that man was, but I know this. He was out there long before we noticed. Maybe even the night before. Maybe he watched us come in. Maybe he was testing the doors, watching for lights to go out. Maybe he knew exactly who was inside. I still remember the exact moment we decided we needed to get away. It was a Thursday evening in early October, and the sky outside our apartment in Boston had turned that deep, bruised purple that always signaled the end of another cold, gray day. I was at the kitchen table, hunched over my laptop, sorting through a week's worth of unresolved emails. Across from me, Katie, my girlfriend of 3 years, stared blankly into her third glass of wine, the exhaustion in her face more telling than anything she'd said out loud that week. We were both burnt out. Work had consumed us. Katie was pulling double shifts as a cardiac nurse at Mass General, and I had just finished a relentless run of software deployment deadlines at my tech firm. Our lives had become a blur of coffee, screen time, and collapsing into bed at midnight. Even the weekends felt like leftovers, half-hearted brunches, silent TV binges, and the occasional argument that ended with a tired apology. It wasn't that we didn't love each other anymore. We were just drained. So when Katie finally broke the silence and said, "Let's get out of here, just disappear for a while," I didn't argue. I shut the laptop and nodded. That night, wrapped in blankets and flicking through listings on her iPad, we found it. A small, detached cottage listed on Airbnb in a remote New Hampshire town called Stoddard. The pictures showed a snow-dusted A-frame tucked against a backdrop of pines and a frozen lake. The host, someone named Claire, had glowing reviews. Peaceful, isolated, perfect for a recharge, the guests all said. It was affordable, it was secluded. It was exactly what we thought we needed. We booked 5 nights starting the following Monday. The confirmation came through almost immediately. Katie smiled for the first time in days, and I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe hope. The host, Claire, messaged us within the hour. She sounded warm and professional, even offered to have the firewood stacked and the space heated before we arrived. There was a note about a lockbox on the porch with the code to be sent the morning of our check-in. Everything felt easy, comforting even. The next few days passed in a blur of packing, last-minute errands, and daydreaming about still mornings by the lake. Katie even bought a film camera. For the vibe, she'd said, laughing. I stocked up on local maps and trail guides. We hadn't taken a trip like this in years, and for once it felt like we were on the same page again. But there were signs, small ones, that started to feel off in hindsight. The first red flag came on Sunday evening. We were finalizing our route when I realized we never got the promised code for the lockbox. I messaged Claire just to check in. No reply. It was late, so I didn't think much of it. But by the next morning, we still hadn't heard back. "Maybe she's just busy," Katie said, scrolling through the old reviews again. "Everyone says she's great, one of the best hosts they've had." She was right. No mention of flakiness, no red flags in the comments. Still, I had a weird feeling in my gut, a kind of low buzz under my skin that I couldn't quite explain. By noon, we were already halfway into New Hampshire. Claire hadn't replied, but we didn't turn around. I don't know if it was stubbornness or just desperation to escape, but we pressed on. The road into Stoddard was long, winding, and nearly empty. Snow flurries danced across the windshield, and the sky had that washed-out gray that makes the afternoon feel like twilight. The town itself barely qualified as one, just a post office, a diner, and a small gas station that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. The further we drove, the more the world seemed to peel away behind us. By the time we turned onto the private road listed in the directions, Katie had grown quiet. She hadn't said much since we passed a dead-end sign about 2 miles back. We crested a hill, and there it was, the cottage, just like the pictures, maybe even more beautiful. A steep A-frame nestled in a grove of pines, its chimney lazily puffing smoke into the cold air. A thin sheet of snow dusted the steps leading up to the porch. The lake was frozen over, glittering behind the trees. But something felt wrong. There was a black SUV parked off to the side, half covered in snow as if it hadn't moved in days. A few logs were stacked neatly by the side of the house, but the porch light was off. The windows were dark. No tire tracks, no footprints, no sign of life. Still no message from Claire. Katie was gripping the sleeves of her coat. Do we knock? We don't even know if she's in there. We climbed the steps to the porch. There was a lockbox beside the door. No note. No code. I tried calling the number from Claire's profile. It rang twice, then cut to voicemail. Katie was starting to look more and more anxious. Her breath came in short, visible bursts in the cold. I tried the door. Unlocked. Inside, the air was ice cold. The smell hit us first. Stale wood smoke and something else underneath. Something sour. Not rotten exactly, but not fresh either. Like a room that hadn't been opened in months. The interior was cozy but cluttered. Firewood stacked beside a blackened hearth. Mismatched furniture. A dusty bookshelf filled with dog-eared paperbacks. The bed upstairs had a faded quilt on it, and one of the pillows looked like it had been hastily tossed aside. A mug half full of something sat on the kitchen counter. Maybe she left in a rush, I offered, though the words felt hollow as I said them. Katie didn't respond. She was staring at a trail of wet spots on the floor, like melted snow. But the door had been closed. No one had walked in since we arrived. At least, not that we could see. That night was the first time I heard the knocking. It was faint, like something tapping at the walls from inside the insulation. I sat up in bed listening. One tap, then another, then silence. I turned to Katie. She was already awake, staring at the ceiling. "You heard that too?" I whispered. She nodded slowly. "It's been happening since 2, every few minutes, from different parts of the cabin." I wanted to be rational. Old cabins make noise, wood contracts, animals nest in walls. But this didn't sound like that. This sounded intentional. The next 2 days were a blur of paranoia. The knocking never stopped. It moved, from the walls, to the ceiling, to the floor beneath our bed. Sometimes it was soft, like fingertips. Other times it sounded like fists. On the second night, Katie swore she heard someone whisper her name. I told her she was dreaming, even though I'd heard it too. We tried to leave on the third morning. That's when we discovered the road was gone. Not blocked, not snowed over. Gone. Where there had been a path through the trees was now dense forest, unbroken. As if we'd never driven in at all. No signal, no GPS. My calls to Claire's number failed to connect entirely. Even the emergency number just gave a hollow tone, like we were dialing from another century. We stopped sleeping after that. We took turns keeping watch. Katie started marking time on the wall with a pocket knife. By her count, we stayed there 7 days. But the sun never changed. It rose at the same gray angle every morning and dipped behind the lake at the same exact hour. And then came the 6th night. The knocking turned to footsteps. We heard them above us in the attic we hadn't noticed before, a square panel in the ceiling near the kitchen. Neither of us wanted to check it, but we couldn't just wait. I pulled the dining table beneath it and climbed up. The panel creaked open. Darkness, dust, cold air pouring down. I raised my phone flashlight and scanned the space. There were dozens of old Polaroids tacked to the beams. Every photo showed the same cabin, same furniture, same layout, but different people, couples, singles, families, all staring blankly at the camera as if caught off guard. Some looked scared, some looked wrong, smiling too wide, eyes glazed over. In the corner of the attic was a worn mattress and a camera on a tripod, still pointed at the trap door. Something moved behind it. I fell backward off the table. Katie screamed. The trap door slammed shut. We didn't sleep after that. We stayed by the fire until it went out. We didn't speak. We barely breathed. At some point, maybe morning, maybe not, there was a knock at the front door. Just one. Then silence. We opened it. The forest path was back, just like it had been when we arrived. No snow on the car, like it had never sat idle. We left without looking back. Claire never responded. The Airbnb listing was gone by the time we got home. We filed a police report. They told us no property had ever been registered at that address. Said the land was part of a conservation area. No structures, no utilities, nothing. Katie doesn't talk about it. The photos on her film camera were all blank, but sometimes when I can't sleep, I go back to the listing in my mind. The A-frame cabin, the lake, the snow, the quiet. And I wonder if maybe it's still there, waiting for the next couple to need an escape. I never imagined a weekend getaway could leave such a deep scar on my memory. Back in November 2019, my wife Eliza and I were going through a rough patch, not in our relationship, but in life. I'd been laid off from my marketing job 3 months earlier, and though she was still working full-time as a dental hygienist, the stress of making ends meet had started to wear on us. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom flat in a noisy part of Milwaukee, and with winter creeping in, the walls had begun to feel like they were closing in. Eliza came home one evening with a tired smile and a suggestion that changed everything. Let's get out of here for a few days. Just the two of us. No job hunts, no bills, just quiet. I was hesitant. We didn't have much money to spare, but when she showed me the listing on her phone, I caved. It was a modern, upscale Airbnb in a small town called Harrowsfield, about 2 hours north. The place looked incredible in the photos. Exposed brick walls, Scandinavian furniture, a freestanding tub with a view of the snow-dusted pine trees. It had 5-star reviews, and the price was shockingly low for what was being offered. Maybe it's just off-season pricing, Eliza said. It's perfect, right? It was perfect, or at least it looked that way. We booked the house for 3 nights. Eliza's sister agreed to watch our dog, and by Friday afternoon we were packed and on the road, spirits lifted for the first time in weeks. The drive was peaceful, long stretches of farmland and snowy back roads. When we pulled into Harrowsfield, the town was nearly silent, as if blanketed in more than just snow. The house was tucked away at the edge of a forest road. It stood tall and square, with large bay windows that reflected the gray sky. Inside, it was even more beautiful than we'd hoped. Warm wood accents, open concept kitchen, a crackling fireplace already prepared with kindling. Eliza turned to me and grinned. We needed this. I smiled back, not realizing how true and how terrifying those words would become. We spent the first evening settling in. Eliza made hot cocoa while I lit the fireplace. We sat on the soft leather couch wrapped in blankets, watching the flames dance. Outside, snow had started falling again, soft and steady. There was no traffic, no sirens, no neighbors stomping overhead, just quiet. That night, we slept better than we had in weeks. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and stepped out onto the back deck. Pine trees surrounded the house like sentries. I could hear nothing but the wind and the occasional creak of branches under snow. I almost didn't go back inside. When Eliza came down, she looked rested but paused when she stepped into the living room. "Do you smell that?" she asked. I sniffed the air. At first, I didn't notice anything, but then it hit. Faint, sharp, chemical, like antiseptic or those wet floor cleaners they use in hospitals. "Maybe the cleaners were just thorough," I said, half joking. "Probably mopped right before we got here." She shrugged and went to make breakfast. But by late afternoon, the smell had gotten stronger. It wasn't constant. It would fade for hours, then suddenly drift in, concentrated, coming from somewhere we couldn't quite place. Eliza opened windows, even though the cold rushed in like knives. We searched the fridge, the trash bin, the drains. Everything was spotless. "This house is too clean," Eliza muttered at one point, half laughing. "Like, weirdly clean." That night, as we watched a movie in the den, I caught it again, the scent, sharper now, almost sterile. I turned down the volume and walked toward the hallway. "Eliza," I called, "do you smell it again?" She nodded, eyes narrowing. "It's stronger." We followed our noses like bloodhounds, eventually tracing the smell to a small linen closet between the master bedroom and bathroom. I opened it. Towels and bedding were stacked neatly, nothing looked out of place. But the scent was thickest here. I pushed the towels aside and tapped the back wall. "Hollow," I said quietly. Eliza gave me a look. "It's just a closet. Let me check something." I got a flashlight from my bag and scanned the inside more closely. Near the floor, in the corner behind the last row of shelves, I noticed something. Hairline cracks in the wall, and a small metal latch half painted over. "Eliza, what is that?" "I think it's a door." We hesitated. The air felt denser somehow, as though the house itself was waiting. I looked at her. "You want me to open it?" She swallowed. "Just see what's behind it. Be careful." I scraped the latch clear and gave it a gentle tug. It clicked. The panel popped open an inch, releasing a sudden wave of chemical-smelling air, so strong it made my eyes water. I pulled the door open the rest of the way. It was a crawl space, narrow, dark, with unfinished wood walls and a low ceiling. I shone the flashlight in and saw nothing. Just insulation, some old paint cans, and a tarp-covered pile of something in the far corner. "Eliza, there's something back here." She stood behind me, tense. "Don't go in." But I did. Slowly, crawling. The floor creaked beneath me. When I reached the tarp, I saw what was under it, and I wish I never had. Underneath were broken pieces of furniture, splintered wood, stained cushions, a lamp missing its base, torn fabric, and something else. A small, leather-bound notebook, warped from moisture, resting on top. I grabbed it and backed out quickly, coughing. Back in the living room, I opened the notebook on the coffee table. Most of the pages were water-damaged and illegible, but a few had writing, shaky, erratic penmanship, dated entries. A name appeared at the top, Calvin R. Doyle, January 2018. We read silently, January 14th. "I don't sleep anymore. The smell won't go. It's in the vents, in the walls." I told the property manager, but he just smiled like he knew something. Said I was just adjusting. Adjusting to what? January 17th. The dreams are the worst. A woman crying. It's always the same. She's in this house, screaming through the walls, but no one hears her. I tried to rip up the floors. There's something under them. I'm sure of it. January 22nd. I can't stay here. The smell is stronger now. It's like it wants me to remember something. I think someone died here. I think... The last sentence was scribbled over and over until the pen tore through the page. We looked at each other. Eliza's face had gone pale. "This wasn't in the listing," she whispered. "No," I said. This is something they hid." The next morning, we packed. I wanted to leave that night, but Eliza was too shaken, and the snow had gotten heavier. We barely slept. Every sound felt louder, distorted. Once in the middle of the night, we both sat up at the same time. We'd heard something, a thud, then a dragging sound, from the hallway. That night, we didn't speak much. We lay in bed fully clothed, eyes wide open, waiting. Around 2 a.m., it happened again. A single thud. Then, the slow drag of something heavy along the hallway floor. We sat up in sync. I reached for the flashlight, but the batteries had died. "Eliza," I whispered, "stay here." "No," she said firmly, gripping my arm. "We go together." The sound had stopped. I stepped into the hallway. The air was freezing, heavier than earlier. Our breath came out in fog. I scanned with the dim light from my phone, expecting, hoping, for nothing. But the linen closet door was wide open. I walked toward it, Eliza behind me. The crawlspace panel was shut again, firmly. I hadn't closed it. "Eliza," I whispered, not taking my eyes off it. "Let's go. Right now." She didn't argue. We packed the car in 10 minutes flat, barely speaking. As we pulled away, I looked back once. The window stared back, dark and blank, like watching eyes. We didn't stop until we were nearly back in Milwaukee. Around dawn, we pulled into a rest area and sat in silence. Eventually, Eliza spoke. "You think that guy in the journal, you think he—" "I don't know," I said quietly, "but I don't think he made it out." We reported everything to Airbnb, the hidden room, the smell, the notebook. We attached photos. Someone from their safety team called us a week later, apologizing profusely. They said the listing had been removed and the owner was being investigated for policy violations. That was the last we heard. Months passed. We tried to move on, but something stayed with us. Something heavy. Eliza started sleeping with a light on. I kept checking closets without realizing it. Then one night I got curious. I Googled the address again. Nothing came up. The listing was gone. No articles, no property records, as if the house had been scrubbed from the internet. I emailed Airbnb again. They replied with a generic statement. "Thank you for reaching out. This matter has been closed and does not require further follow-up." That was it. Even now, years later, I can still smell it sometimes. Sterile, chemical, cold. It hits me at random moments. In a hotel lobby, a newly cleaned stairwell, sometimes even at home. And I remember, not the sound, not the cold, not even the notebook. I remember the feeling that someone was still in that house, still trapped behind that panel, buried in its silence, that no amount of bleach or paint could hide what happened in those walls. And worst of all, that someone else is probably staying there now, thinking they've found the perfect escape. I never intended to spend the summer in a place like Marrow Creek. Originally, the plan was simple: get away from the chaos of Boston, spend a few quiet weeks helping my younger cousin Ava settle into her new teaching job, and maybe use the downtime to clear my head after a rough breakup. I'd found the Airbnb listing late one night, scrolling through options on my phone with bleary eyes. It was a last-minute deal. Historic countryside villa in secluded Marrow Creek, perfect for writers, artists, and those seeking peace. The pictures showed a grand 2-story farmhouse with white-painted wood siding, a wraparound porch, and ivy clinging to the columns. It looked serene, old-world, almost cinematic. I remember thinking it had a kind of dignity to it. Ava agreed it looked perfect, and by the next afternoon, I'd booked the entire month. Marrow Creek wasn't on any major maps. You had to zoom in 3 times on Google Earth just to see the name, tucked between dusty roads and endless pine groves in the far corner of North Carolina. The GPS lost signal about 5 miles from the house, and we had to rely on the written directions the host had emailed. By the time we arrived, the sun was slipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the cracked driveway. A chorus of cicadas greeted us as I pulled the car to a stop. The house looked even larger in person. The paint was more weathered than in the photos, and one of the porch railings leaned precariously to the side, but it still held that same quiet nobility. "I love it," Ava said as she stepped out of the car, shielding her eyes. "It's like something out of an old Southern novel." I wasn't quite as sold, but I didn't say anything. We were both tired from the drive, and the thought of a warm shower and a soft bed was too tempting to nitpick. The host, a woman named Deborah, had left the key in a rusted lockbox beside the door. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and something else I couldn't place, something older. The furniture was a strange mix of antiques and modern pieces. There was a grandfather clock in the hallway that didn't seem to work, and a leather sectional sofa in the living room that clearly did. The floors creaked with every step. Our rooms were upstairs. Mine overlooked the front yard, and Ava's faced the woods in the back. We unpacked in silence, too worn out to talk much, and by the time we settled down with a shared bottle of wine in the living room, the woods outside had fallen into a pitch-black silence. That night I slept harder than I had in weeks. No dreams, no tossing. Just blackness. The next morning started slow, with the kind of lazy quiet that makes you feel like the world forgot about you. Ava left around 9 to meet the school principal in town, and I stayed behind, intending to read and maybe explore the property a bit. I made myself coffee and stepped out onto the porch, where the air was already thick with humidity. That was the first time I noticed the rocking chair. It was an old, worn thing with peeling white paint, tucked into the corner of the porch. I was certain it hadn't been there the night before, but I told myself I must have missed it. Still, it faced the woods at a strange angle, as if someone had dragged it into position to watch something. I didn't sit in it. Instead, I spent the day inside. I FaceTimed a friend, tidied the kitchen, and made myself a simple lunch. But something about the house felt off. Not overtly scary, just wrong in the quietest way. The kind of wrong that hides under the floorboards and waits. When Ava returned that evening, she was all smiles. "Everyone at the school is so nice. They said they haven't had a new hire in years." She laughed. "Apparently people don't move to Marrow Creek. They only leave." She meant it as a joke, but it landed strange. I asked if anyone had said anything about the house. "Just that it's old. Some woman named Miriam used to own it. Taught piano out of the living room. She died a while ago, I think." That night, the rocking chair was facing the door. That night, I didn't sleep as soundly. I woke once around 2:13 a.m. The glowing red numbers on the bedside clock burned into my memory. The house was silent, except for a faint, rhythmic creaking. I sat up, heart thudding. The rocking chair. I went to the window. From my room, I could just make out the corner of the porch. It was moving, slow and steady, like someone was sitting in it, rocking themselves in the dark. But there was no one there. I told myself it was the wind, but the trees weren't moving. The next morning, I asked Ava if she'd seen anything strange. She paused. "Actually, yeah. I woke up around 3 and thought I saw someone standing in the woods. Just standing there. But when I blinked, they were gone. Probably just my imagination." Neither of us said anything more. But after that, something shifted in the house. The air felt heavier. Lights flickered more often. Doors wouldn't stay closed. I started hearing faint piano music from the living room at night. Always the same broken melody, notes played out of time like a beginner's hands. Ava heard it too. We stopped pretending we didn't. She began sleeping with her light on. I started locking my door. One afternoon, I found an old photograph tucked behind a loose board in the upstairs hallway. It was black and white, faded. 4 children seated at a piano, and a woman standing behind them. Handwritten on the back, "Miriam's class, spring 1963. One of the children had a dark smudge over their face. Not ink. Something else. We left the house 3 days early, packed everything in the middle of the night and didn't say a word to each other until we hit the highway. When we dropped off the key in the lockbox, the rocking chair was still, facing the woods again. Ava doesn't talk about Marrow Creek anymore. She quit the job before the school year started, said she just didn't feel right about staying. I don't blame her. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I still think about the house, about the chair, about the melody. I tell myself we imagined it, that it was just an old house and tired minds. But deep down, I know better. Some places don't want to be left alone, and some echoes never stop. I never believed in omens, at least not until that weekend in Vermont. It was late January of 2019 when I convinced my wife Claire to take a break. We'd both been burning out at our jobs in Boston. She was working 60-hour weeks at a pediatric clinic, and I was drowning in client deadlines at a branding firm. Our 10th anniversary was approaching, and something about hitting that milestone felt more significant than either of us had expected. We didn't want to do the usual. No fancy dinner, no city escape. We wanted stillness, solitude, snow, something different, something memorable. So, we started looking for a winter cabin, someplace secluded but comfortable, scenic but not too remote. After hours of browsing Airbnb listings, Claire found it. A newly listed A-frame nestled at the edge of a frozen lake in a tiny town called Grantham, Vermont. The photos looked pulled from a storybook. Pine trees heavy with snow, a wraparound deck and wide floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the white expanse of the lake. The host's name was Evan, and he had a handful of glowing reviews. We booked it immediately. 3 nights, Friday to Monday. The moment we clicked confirm, Claire leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "This is going to be good for us." Back then, I believed her. The drive from Boston to Grantham took just under 4 hours. We left early Friday morning to beat the storm that had been inching across the radar all week. Claire made a playlist, old songs we used to listen to when we first met, a blend of Norah Jones and Death Cab, the kind of music that made you feel like you were in a movie. By the time we crossed the Vermont state line, the highway had narrowed into rural backroads lined with naked trees and scattered farmhouses. Claire pointed out horses standing in the snow and tried to guess what each abandoned barn might have been used for. It felt like we were slowly shedding the chaos of our lives with every mile. Just before 1 p.m., we arrived at the property. The GPS led us down a narrow, unpaved road that twisted through thick pine woods before opening up into a clearing. There it was, the cabin. It looked even more beautiful in person. A steep A-frame with jet black siding and triangular windows that reflected the lake just behind it. Everything was blanketed in snow. Not the dirty, slushy snow of the city. This was clean, untouched powder that made every surface look soft and untouched. We parked in a small gravel lot at the base of the property and followed a shoveled path up to the cabin door. It creaked when I opened it. Not ominously, just enough to remind us we were in a place untouched by the world we'd left behind. Inside, it was warm and inviting. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something herbal, maybe eucalyptus or sage. Claire immediately gravitated toward the fireplace, kneeling down to examine the stacked kindling. I wandered into the kitchen and found a handwritten welcome note on the counter, tucked beside a small mason jar filled with cocoa mix. "Welcome, Daniel and Claire. I hope this weekend brings you peace and quiet. The landline works for emergencies. No cell service out here, but that's the beauty of it. Let the mountains hold you." Evan, "Let the mountains hold you?" Claire read over my shoulder and laughed. "That's either poetic or mildly cultish." "I'm voting poetic," I said, wrapping my arms around her. "We deserve a weekend like this." She nodded, and for the first time in months, she looked genuinely relaxed. That first night was everything we hoped for. We cooked a simple pasta dinner, drank wine by the fire, and played cards at the wooden dining table. Outside, the wind whistled through the trees, and snow began to fall again, dusting the windows in white. At one point, Claire rested her head on my lap and stared up at me with this soft, tired look. "You ever wonder if we've changed too much?" she asked quietly. I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Changed how?" "I don't know. Like, who we were back when we first got married. We used to stay up all night talking about dreams, now we talk about deadlines." I paused. "Maybe that's why we're here. To remember what that felt like." She smiled and closed her eyes. "I want to remember. I really do." And I meant it when I said, "Me too." We slept in the upstairs loft beneath thick quilts in a king-sized bed that smelled like lavender. The wind picked up through the night and the lake groaned beneath the ice. It was a strange sound, like the earth sighing in its sleep. But neither of us minded. It was part of the wilderness charm. The next morning, Claire woke up before me and made coffee. I found her wrapped in a blanket on the deck, sipping from a chipped white mug, staring out at the lake. "It's frozen solid," she said. "I checked the ice. It's like 3 inches thick." "You planning to walk across it?" She shrugged. "Maybe, just to say I did." I smiled, but the thought made me uneasy. There was something so vast and quiet about the lake. Something too still. After breakfast, we ventured into Grantham, a town of maybe 1,000 people. It had one main street, lined with antique shops and a general store. We stopped at a bakery called Maple and Birch and ordered 2 maple lattes and a fresh cinnamon roll. The owner was a woman in her 60s with long gray braids and an accent I couldn't place. "You folks staying up near Silver Hollow?" she asked while ringing us up. Claire nodded. "Cabin by the lake. Rented it on Airbnb." The woman gave a polite smile, but something in her expression shifted, like she wanted to say something else but didn't. "Beautiful property," she said instead. "Just keep your firewood dry. Weather's turning tonight." We thanked her and left. On the drive back, Claire asked, "Did you notice that?" The way she said it? "Yeah," I admitted. "It was weird." She looked at us like we were dumb for staying there. I shrugged. Maybe she just knows the storm's going to be bad. By late afternoon, the snow was falling hard. We stayed indoors, watched a movie on Claire's laptop, and cooked a big dinner. Around 8 p.m., the power flickered once but came back almost immediately. Then, something strange happened. I went to grab a bottle of wine from the kitchen and noticed that one of the cabinets was cracked open. I was certain it had been closed earlier. It wasn't dramatic, just an inch or two ajar, but it stood out. I closed it and returned to the living room. "Everything okay?" Claire asked, stretching out on the sofa. "Yeah. Thought I left a cabinet open, but maybe I'm just losing it." She didn't press it, and I didn't bring it up again. We fell asleep on the couch, the fire crackling low beside us. At 2:17 a.m., we woke to a loud thud. It came from upstairs, from the loft. I sat up immediately. Claire grabbed my arm, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" I did. We waited in silence, holding our breath. Another sound, fainter this time, like soft creaking, as if someone were shifting their weight on the floor above us. "Maybe the wind," I offered. But we both knew better. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer near the fireplace and started up the stairs, each step groaning under my weight. When I reached the top, I scanned the loft. Empty. Nothing seemed out of place. I was about to head back down when something caught my eye. The bedroom closet door was open. Not wide, just enough to make my stomach twist. It had been closed when we went to sleep. I never thought I'd actually take a vacation. For the past 7 years, life had been one long stretch of work, late hours, and burnout masked as dedication. I ran a small but growing digital consultancy firm based out of Chicago, and while my business had thrived, I had quietly deteriorated. My therapist had been warning me for months. "You're burning the candle at both ends, Aiden. You're not just tired, you're unraveling." My wife, Maya, had been even more blunt. "You're either taking a break or I'm packing my bags and going without you." She wasn't bluffing. Maya had stood by me through the chaos, but even her patience had limits. So, under pressure from both women in my life, I finally relented. I cleared the week, turned on the out of office, and for the first time in what felt like years, we were going to do absolutely nothing. We didn't want a resort or a crowded tourist town. We wanted space, quiet, privacy. Maya had found a rental on a website that specialized in countryside getaways. It wasn't technically Airbnb, but it operated similarly: verified listings, photos, host communication. The place she found was a secluded house just outside a small town called Ashwood Creek, about a 4-hour drive from the city. The listing looked perfect. 2 floors, modern interiors, surrounded by woods, a wide backyard with a fire pit and a private hot tub. The photos were flooded with natural light: polished hardwood floors, soft neutral tones, wide windows facing the forest. The host, a woman named Vivian Locke, lived on the lower floor with her husband, though she assured us the setup was designed for maximum privacy. The only shared space was the driveway. It was pricier than other listings, $125 a night, but it felt worth it. Maya was sold immediately. I was hesitant, but I didn't want to argue anymore. I just wanted sleep. We booked it for 5 nights. The drive to Ashwood Creek was uneventful, long stretches of flat highway slowly giving way to winding rural roads, the city's noise fading behind us. Maya drove while I dozed in and out of sleep, the kind where your body rests but your mind keeps spinning. The town itself was small: 1 grocery store, a diner, a gas station. It felt like stepping back in time. We stopped briefly for snacks, then followed Vivian's directions up a narrow gravel road that twisted through dense woods until we saw the house. And it was beautiful. Nestled between tall pines and maple trees, it stood slightly elevated, with wooden siding painted a soft gray and large windows catching the late afternoon sun. The place looked exactly like the photos, maybe even better in person. Vivian greeted us at the door. She was in her 50s, maybe older, wearing a long cardigan despite the mild weather. She had this polite, almost brittle smile and a soft voice that never quite matched her intense, watchful eyes. Her husband, Elias, didn't speak much, just a nod, a handshake, and then he disappeared around the side of the house. Vivian led us upstairs and gave us a quick tour. Everything was immaculate: clean linens, fully stocked kitchen, welcome snacks in a basket on the counter. "We're just downstairs if you need anything," Vivian said as we unpacked, "but we like to keep to ourselves." Maya smiled. "That's exactly what we're looking for." Vivian nodded slowly, her gaze lingering a moment too long before she stepped back toward the stairs. "Oh, and one more thing," she added, turning. "The woods can carry sound at night. Just don't be alarmed if you hear strange noises. It's wildlife. Always is." With that, she left. That first evening felt like the calm I hadn't known I needed. Maya lit a few candles while I unpacked. The sunset washed the forest in amber light, and for a moment, I forgot about the missed calls, the endless client demands, the spreadsheet that had haunted my dreams for the past year. Dinner was simple: grilled cheese, tomato soup, and red wine, but it felt like a celebration. We ate on the back deck, the forest around us whispering with the wind. No traffic, no phones, just the 2 of us and the cicadas humming into dusk. Later, Maya sank into the couch with a book while I wandered the house, soaking in the unfamiliar stillness. The place had a warmth to it, lived in but well-maintained. The decor leaned minimalist: framed nature prints, soft rugs, and tall bookshelves lined with travel memoirs and local history. I found one in particular that caught my eye: The Forgotten Woods of Ashwood Creek. It was slim, more like a booklet, and looked self-published. I flipped through it idly. A few pages in, I found a passage about local legends. It is said that the woods beyond Iron Ridge Road were once sacred ground to a now-vanished tribe. Locals still report strange sounds, chanting, voices, and occasionally lights moving through the trees at night. Most dismiss it as folklore. Still, few dare to enter those woods after dark. I chuckled. Campfire stuff, I muttered, setting it back on the shelf. That night, sleep came easily. Maya drifted off beside me, her breathing slow and even. I lay awake for a while, just listening. The house was silent, but not the kind of silence you get in a city apartment. This was deeper, more absolute. And then, a sound. Faint, barely audible. A soft, dragging noise. I sat up, heart suddenly tapping against my ribs. The sound came again, this time clearer. It wasn't in the house. It was outside, moving through the leaves behind the bedroom wall. I held my breath. Footsteps. Slow. Uneven. A deer, I told myself. Or a raccoon. Maybe a fox. But a part of me knew better. The pace was wrong. And when I dared to peer through the window, there was nothing. Only the dark outlines of trees, unmoving in the windless night. The morning arrived with golden light and coffee on the deck. I didn't mention the footsteps. Maybe it had been a dream, or maybe I was just jumpy. Maya, blissfully unaware, was in full vacation mode. She had plans. A forest walk, sunbathing, a hot tub session after dark. We hiked a short trail behind the house that looped through the woods and came out near a dried-up stream bed. Maya took photos of mushrooms and odd moss patterns while I tried to shake the sense of unease I still carried. The woods felt off, not threatening, just hollow, like the air was thinner, like sound didn't travel right. At one point, Maya turned to me, puzzled. "Do you hear that?" "What?" "Exactly. Nothing. No birds, not even wind." She was right. The forest had gone completely still. We stood in that silence for a few seconds, then she shook it off with a shrug and kept walking. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That evening, I met Elias again. I had stepped out to get firewood from the shed when I saw him. He stood near the base of the stairs that led to their floor, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette. "Evening," he said. His voice was a low rasp, like gravel in a tin can. "Evening." I nodded, not really wanting to chat. "You settling in okay?" he asked, exhaling smoke. "Yeah, it's beautiful out here." "Quiet." He nodded once. "Real quiet. House don't like noise." I frowned. "Come again?" He glanced at me, eyes hard. "Just saying. Some places are built different. They soak things in." Before I could respond, he flicked the cigarette into a coffee can and vanished down the stairs. I didn't tell Maya about that either. That night, Maya wanted to try the hot tub. We poured drinks and stepped into the swirling water just after 9. The steam rose into the crisp night air, and for a while, it was perfect. But then the pool lights flickered. Just once. Then again. Then they went dark completely. "Did you touch anything?" Maya asked. Maybe the power tripped. But the house lights were still on. I went to check the pool switch box behind the shed. It hadn't been touched. I flipped the breaker anyway. The lights returned, humming softly beneath the surface. When I turned back to the tub, Maya was staring toward the woods. "There was someone there," she whispered. "Just now, between those 2 trees." I froze. "You sure?" She nodded slowly. Tall, didn't move, just watching. I grabbed a flashlight and swept it across the trees. Nothing. Still, we went inside. I double-locked the door. Midnight. I woke up to the sound of a woman humming. It wasn't Maya. She was fast asleep. The melody was unfamiliar, soft, like a lullaby, but broken in places. It was coming from behind the wall, near the stairs. I stood in the dark hallway, heart thudding, listening. Then, 3 knocks. Slow, precise. Knock, 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 at our door. I stepped forward, my voice barely a whisper. "Vivian?" No answer. I opened it. Nothing there. But I heard footsteps descending the stairs. And in the distant dark, just before the sound faded, I swore I heard someone whisper my name.